Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I am making a card using some distress inks and distress paints. So I'm starting with a piece of white cardstock for this card, and I am inking this up with the Broken China distress ink and my round blending tool. So I'm going to ink up this entire piece of white cardstock. I wouldn't necessarily need to do it on the bottom part because it is going to be covered up. But just to make sure that there is no white showing, I'm just going to ink up the entire thing. I'm using regular white cardstock for this. I'm not using watercolor cardstock. But I do find that blending on watercolor cardstock with the blending foam is a little bit easier. So if you do have trouble getting your colors to blend and making it look smoother, I would try the Distress watercolor cardstock. I just think that it's a little easier to work with. Another thing is kind of putting down a layer of ink and then letting it dry. And if you come back and then work on some more ink, it does blend a little bit better. So then I'm going to take my second color, which is the Faded Jeans, and I am just going to apply this along the outside edge. And I just wanted that little bit of darker color along the outside and then towards the bottom because I want it to kind of look like a sky, so darker on the bottom and lighter on the top. So I'm just blending this again as well best as I can. And it doesn't have to be perfect since it is a sky. It kind of looks cool to have that little bit of white in the background too that kind of simulates clouds. And then I'm going back in with the Broken China and just blending both of those colors together. That's another distress ink tip that I have, is to go back and then blend that darker color with the lighter color once again, and it just helps it look like a more smooth image. So next I'm taking some distress paint, and this is the Mulled Lawn, and I'm putting a little on my craft sheet. I want to get that paint flowing in there since I haven't used these in a while. The tip kind of dries up a little bit, so if you have trouble, you just want to add a little bit of water to your craft sheet and then kind of swirl your dauber in there. And I'm just flicking this up from the bottom. And this is the grass on my cardstock, so I don't want it to look perfect at all on the top. I want it to kind of have that flicked motion on there. So once I finish that, I just cleaned up my craft mat and then let it dry. And then I'm going back in once more and adding a second layer to the bottom. So these are just shorter little strokes to make it look like there's multiple layers of grass. So I'm just adding those little bits on there. And then I want to let that dry completely. So while I'm letting that dry, I'll move on to the rest of my card. I have this stamp set from Paper Smooches, and I'm going to stamp the cow image. I love these little critters. I think they're just adorable, the little chubby animals. So I'm going to mount that on my clear acrylic block and then ink that up with the VersaFine ink. Now, to be honest, I am coloring this in with Copic markers, and I'm not sure why I chose this ink. I must have wanted to color it in with colored pencils, but then ended up coloring it in with Copics instead. So if you are coloring this in with Copics, I would recommend using the Tuxedo Black Memento ink. And I didn't even notice that I stamped it with that, because when I was coloring this, the ink started to bleed a little bit, and I thought that was kind of weird that the ink was bleeding because I was like, I thought it was my Tuxedo Black Memento ink. And then when I started watching this replay, when I was editing this, I noticed that I stamped it with my VersaFine instead. So yeah, if you use your Copic markers, use the Memento ink instead. But I'm just coloring this really simply with my Copics. I have the C1 and C3, just adding little bits of color around the spots, but I'm keeping the rest of it white. And then I colored in the nose with the R20, which is a really light, more dusty pink color. And then that's all the coloring I did on that. So I didn't do too much blending, so the ink really didn't matter in the end. But then I went ahead and fussy cut that out as well. So I'm going to stamp a few clouds in my background. I have the Sunny Day set from Mint Owl Studio, and I'm stamping both of the clouds, the flat-bottomed clouds, and I'm stamping this with pigment ink. It's the Hero Hues Unicorn White ink. And I'm just going to stamp these on my background. And that white pigment ink sits on top of the paper, so this white ink is phenomenal. I would recommend this 100 times over because that white really shows up on that cardstock. And it's just, I have trouble with white inks in the past, so this one works really well. And then the sentiment, I'm using a different Paper Smooches stamp set because I wanted the one that said Let's Party. So I am going to stamp this with some black ink. I'm going to put this on my clear acrylic block and try to line it up with the edges. And I'm going to stamp this in the grass, so like on the bottom part. And I'm going to ink this up with my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then stamp that in the lower right hand corner. Alright, so I have a piece of pattern paper from the Lawn Fawn Let's Polka 6x6 paper pad. It's the gray polka dot. And this is going to be the background for my Distress Ink paint piece. I'm using many different companies on this card, I figured out after watching this. And all of the supplies that I am using will be linked below if you're interested in any of them. So I'm going to go ahead and tie a bow. I'm using some May Arts twine, and I was going to tie it that way along the top, and then I was like, I'm going to cover up all of that grass that I just made. So I decided to turn it and do it up and down on my card instead, just because I didn't want to cover up all of that grass that I just made on my card, because that was the one thing I really wanted to do on this card. So you can see I just turned it up and down, and then I'm going to tape both of the ends on the back of my cardstock. So I have 2 pieces of Scotch tape, and I'm just kind of planning this out, how far over I want my ribbon to go and where I want to place the cow on the card. So once I get that situated, I'll go ahead and tape those on. And then when you do like a bow with this ribbon, you want to leave a little bit of extra give on the front part of your card. So you want to make it a little bit looser on the front just so that you have some space for when you tie your bow, because it will make that ribbon tighter and it will kind of curl your paper. So I cut an extra piece and then I'm just tying that bow on the front. And then I'll trim off the extra ribbons. I always like to cut mine at an angle, but you could always do like a fishtail cut or cut it straight across. Alright, so then I can go ahead and place the cow onto my card. I'm using some 3D foam squares from Best Creation. And I'm still kind of situating that bow. It has to be up far enough so that I can place my cow down. So like I said, I have the large foam squares from Best Creation. And I'm also going to use those to pop up my background on my card base. So I'm just adding a few of those all along the edges and then some towards the center of my card. Some of the inks that I used on this were still a little bit dry on the front, so if you have more patience than me, you just want to let those dry before doing this step on your card. Alright, so I can flip it over and then put that onto my white A2 size card base. Alright, and like I said, I'll add some more 3D foam squares to the back of my little cow image. And then place that slightly overlapping the ribbon on the card. And then that is my finished card for today. So hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial and will try working a little bit more with your distress inks and distress paints. If you're not already, make sure you subscribe to my channel and I will see you back here next time. Bye!